Welcome in week 3 edition of your NFL DFS first look video. We're building a first look lineup for our week 3 NFL DFS contests, aka the cash process. Welcome in. Week 2 is in the books. It was an up and down week for me DFS wise. We can consider a cash game loss for me in week 2. Did not like week 2 as it progressed. I actually only lost around 25% of my entries, won a lot of my head-to-heads, especially at the lower dollar levels, which helped it from a bad week to not as bad week. But I didn't cash the main big kind of double ups, so I'll consider that a loss. And then obviously, I didn't make money, so definitely a loss. So 1-1 for me to begin the season in NFL DFS cash games. Ended up being a pretty good week though. Absolutely just wreaking havoc on the betting streets. If you guys are interested at all, I encourage you guys to sign up at betkarma.com/pricing. Follow me on Twitter. I tweet out some bets there as well, but really strong week for us betting. And that was capped off on Monday night with Darnell Mooney anytime touchdown plus 340. So yeah. And if you want access to the DFS core plays, my cash game core, tournament cores, I have yet to have a big sweat on a main slate. It's only been 2 weeks in tournaments, but I've been really strong on the smaller slates. We had a big time score on the afternoon slate in week 1, and I posted my core in the Discord for the early slate last week, which was a Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors team, and that cashed as well. So the smaller slates I've been having a lot of success on tournament-wise, but still waiting. Hopefully this week is the week, I can get on track with the tournament cores on the main slate, but dfskarma.com/pricing for that. With that being said, let's kind of dive in here to this week 3 slate. We have one less game because there's 2 Monday night games this week on top of the Sunday night and Thursday night. So a 12 game slate as opposed to last week's 13 game slate on DraftKings. Just to talk higher level here and talk injury stuff. Obviously, there's been a ton of injuries throughout the first 2 weeks of the season. There's going to be news to monitor kind of leading up to lock this weekend as well. This past week, we ran pretty good with that. There wasn't a ton of guys' status that was up in the air leading to the weekend. We kind of knew on Friday who was playing and who wasn't. We obviously got the surprise Evan Ingram inactive on Sunday morning after he got injured in warmups, but that didn't affect the slate really at all. Hopefully that's the case this week, but there's a number of guys with soft tissue injuries, so I don't know. Maybe there is news that we need to watch over the weekend, but hopefully that's not the case. I will run through injury stuff here at the top before we dive into the slate. Obviously, we have Cooper Kupp, who is going to miss some significant time, as it appears. That'll be a big talking point for us when I get to receiver. Deebo Samuel out as well. That was a surprise news on Monday. I didn't even know that he picked up an injury in that game. That was going to put him in jeopardy of missing games, and it sounds like he is going to miss a few. So that's significant there for San Francisco. A.J. Brown. Lisa Salters reported on Monday night that A.J. Brown expects to miss a few games, not just that Monday night game. So that's noteworthy there. Amon-Ra St. Brown picked up an injury in their game against the Buccaneers, but it looks like he's okay. Of all the injuries that's happened the first 2 weeks, he's the one I'm least concerned about because he played injured all last season, and it sounded like Dan Campbell didn't sound overly concerned about it. So St. Brown, I think, is okay. Justin Jefferson, I think, is okay, but that's one we'll have to monitor leading up to lock there. Tyjae Spears is going to be questionable, I think, this week. That would affect Tony Pollard a little bit if he were to miss the game. Keenan Allen missed Sunday night, so we can watch him as well. Have him on my list. And then Rashad White may be questionable this week as well, which we'll talk about that when we get to running back. As we dive into quarterback here, going back to kind of where we were at last week, not wanting to overreact to week 1, man, once again, the passing numbers across the league have been down. I mean, through 2 weeks, the average passing yards per game for a quarterback in the NFL below 200 yards, and these teams continue to skew a little bit more run heavy than anything we've seen, in the last few years. So that's noteworthy. It wasn't just a 1 week sample size. Now we have 2 weeks of that. And I do think that hurts the upper end of quarterback. I mean, I'm going to be interested in Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. But yeah, I mean, if these teams are not going to be quite as pass heavy, we're not going to see these huge passing numbers every single week from these guys. And I do think that that hurts, the top end of quarterback when it comes to these DFS slates. And if you've watched these videos, like if it's first time, if it's your first year watching, or if it's your 8th or 9th year watching, since I started doing these videos, I appreciate each and every one of you, but it's pretty crazy, like how nuanced DFS has become, and being able to adapt to things and be ahead of the curve has been such an advantage to us over the course of these years. And this might have to be, one of those situations. And I think what's so crazy about it is, 8, 9 years ago when I started making these videos, spending down at quarterback and getting a Daniel Jones, any of these guys, Will Levis, it didn't really matter so much the actual quarterback. When I first started doing these videos, especially for cash game contests, it didn't matter if the quarterback was good or bad. Like we were looking for the cheapest possible quarterback who was in a good matchup to plug into our lineups so we could spend up at running back and, really increase the overall floor of our lineup for cash games. And over the last, I'd say probably 4 years, really since the emergence of Lamar Jackson, that first year when he broke out and, won MVP, since then it's been kind of shifted to where teams are running the ball less. So we weren't spending up at running back. We were kind of in the mid tier of running back, but we wanted to get up to Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts, at the top end of QB. So we kind of saw the game go from one thing and it completely changed to a whole entire new game over the past 4 to 5 years. And what's crazy about it is we may be seeing it shift back. I don't know yet. It's only been 2 weeks. I'm not making any drastic changes right now, but it's just so crazy that like I've been making these videos so long to where the game started out one way, it shifted to a completely other way, and it might be shifting completely back towards kind of where we started. And it's something, to just keep on your mind as we progress on through the season. With that being said, week 3 slate, not a lot of good games on this slate. We have Eagles Saints with a 49.5 total. We've got Texans Vikings with a 45.5 total. And we've got the Lions Cardinals with a 52.5 total. Ravens Cowboys in there with a 49 as well. Everything other than that is low. I mean, we're looking at, 38.5, 36.5. 35.5. Chargers, Steelers, 35.5. 39.5. Broncos, Bucks. Like really, really gross games. There's a couple good games, which was kind of the case last week too. So we should see ownership, at least in tournaments, kind of really concentrate on the few good games that we do have. At quarterback, though, like I said, at the top, we have Lamar, we have Jalen Hurts, we have Kyler Murray. That's the big three for me this week. Jalen Hurts, something was up with the Eagles last year. Obviously, we know that. They started the season, super hot. Looked like there was no hangover coming off that Super Bowl. They were rolling. AJ Brown was going off. Jalen Hurts was going off. Like things looked good. And then something changed. Something flipped a switch second half of the season. They closed the season terribly. They got blown out in the playoffs. And to be honest, over the course of that second half, Jalen Hurts did not look like the Jalen Hurts that we've come to love in daily fantasy. I mean, he looked slow on the field, in my opinion. And this year, that's not been the case. That Monday night game was the first time since early last season I've seen, the Jalen Hurts that we want to play in DFS. He looked really good running the ball. He looked fast, had his speed back, 13 rush attempts for 85 yards. Obviously got the tush push rushing touchdown as well. So yeah, he's at the top of my board here for cash games this week, along with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is someone I've talked about on this video each of the first 2 weeks. Was really high on him coming into the season. Thought this Cardinals offense was going to be really good, and I thought that their defense is bad enough. It's going to force them into shootouts. That was not the case last week because the Rams just completely bottomed out, especially once Cooper Kupp went out of that game. But yeah, Detroit should be able to score here against this defense. He's at home. He's looked fantastic through 2 weeks. Like, couldn't be more excited for the season-long outlook of Kyler Murray. So really, Hurts and Kyler are at the top of my cash game list this week. I'm going to plug Kyler Murray into our first look lineup, especially given that, that's the 52.5 over-under game, and just looks like a really good spot. If we're looking for a cheaper quarterback this week, you can consider Brock Purdy, Derek Carr, even Geno Smith. Like, those guys definitely all stick out to me. Derek Carr, I think, is the most interesting just because I talked about it on the Sunday stream this past weekend, but there's a chance that this Saints offense is just really good. And that's been the case through 2 weeks. Like, Clint Kubiak has been putting on a masterclass in terms of calling plays. And if you look at kind of the metrics and dive a little bit deeper, Philly has really gotten beat when teams are using pre-snap motion this year. And if you look at some of the numbers in terms of like fantasy point per drop back and all that stuff, it's been really advantageous to use play action and pre-snap motion against this Eagles team this year. I believe they are Philly secondary bottom 5 in terms of yards per attempt allowed when the team uses pre-snap motion. And the big change that Clint Kubiak has made on this Saints team is the use of pre-snap motion going from bottom of the league to top of the league, and the use of play action going from dead last season to first overall in the NFL through 2 weeks. So do think it's an interesting spot there for Derek Carr, but really going to probably try and get up to Kyler in cash. And then you have Darnold down there as well, who's looked great through the first few weeks of the season. Moving on to running back. I mean, you can see here, Kenneth Walker I did not include in my injury blurb at the start of the video here, but does sound like he's going to miss this game as well. So add him onto the injury list there. But with McCaffrey out, Jordan Mason, we saw him go for 100 yards and a touchdown again last week. He's just too cheap. He should be more expensive, in my opinion, than $6,200. So he's going to just plug and play into the first look lineup. Figuring out what to do with that second running back spot is a little bit, tougher. You do have Barkley and Kamara at the top here, who I think are both good plays. You also have Devon Achane here, who, if you follow me or this channel, I've been super high on this season. I think he is the biggest benefactor of Tua being out. Like, obviously, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are not going to have the same ceiling with him off the field, but I don't know if Achane, it really matters. Skylar Thompson, when he's played, has targeted running backs at a very high rate. I think that if anything, they're going to be more motivated to kind of skew more run heavy. I think that plays into Devon Achane's hands. I don't think they're concerned at all about his injury. I mean, he was like quote unquote questionable going into that Thursday night game. 22 rush attempts, 7 catches on 7 targets. Like, I really think the workload is of no concern right now for Achane. And I think 7K is a completely fine price tag. So he is in the cash game mix for me, as well as Barkley and Kamara. If we're dropping down here, there's some more guys in this mid-tier. James Conner's had a really good role to start the season. J.K. Dobbins has had a really good role to start the season. Zach Charbonnet, without Kenneth Walker, looked great in that game. Analytically, he's not the most efficient running back, but 14 rush attempts and 5 targets will certainly play for me, at 6K in a home game in what should be a decent game against Miami. Obviously not the same environment as if we had kind of Tua at quarterback, but I think he's firmly in play at 6K. Tony Pollard's in play for me at 6K as well, especially if Tyjae Spears were, to miss that game. So several options here in the mid-tier, in my opinion, just for cash games, and then tournaments. This range is loaded as well. So for me, I really like this is my true first look at the pricing here, so I really don't know. I'm gonna put Charbonnet in for right now, but that's not a firm decision. Obviously, this is not gonna be my final lineup. I will post that on Sunday morning for the subscribers, but this is just my first look at the slate. And while we're kind of on that subject, if you're watching the video on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out. You guys went crazy last week as well, over 100 likes again. I really appreciate that. So go ahead and drop a like on the video as we continue on. There's one value running back I wanted to note here. One, Bucky Irving. If Rashad White gets ruled out of this game, we'll be plugging Bucky Irving in at 5,100. Lock and load Jordan Mason, Bucky Irving in cash games if Rashad White were to miss this game. One that I thought was interesting for tournaments, Donta Foreman started the game for the Browns last week. Saw double the rush attempts of Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford looked good to me in limited action, but Donta Foreman, 14 rush attempts, did get some red zone looks as well. 4,400 is really cheap. Like, we really don't see quote unquote starting running backs at that price that often. So I thought that was interesting for tournaments. Maybe, we could consider some Donta Foreman this week. Moving on to receiver here. Loaded range here at the top once again. CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. All three are great plays, assuming they're Jefferson and St. Brown are good to go. Tyreek is going to be kind of relegated to tournament-only status as long as Tua's out. And then we have Cooper Kupp doubtful, A.J. Brown doubtful. Devontae Adams there at 76, Marv Harrison at 74, Nico's been an absolute alpha at 73, Mike Evans 72, and that's it for the above 7K range. The first person I'm going to plug into this lineup is Devonta Smith at 6,900. I thought Dallas had too heavy of a run approach against New Orleans this past week. Going to be curious to see kind of how Philly schemes to attack this defense, but really it doesn't matter for me. With A.J. Brown out, I think this salary was made with the assumption that A.J. Brown would be in. Lisa Salters dropped that news on Monday night that he's probably going to miss this game, and the salaries were already out. So Devonta Smith at 6,900 is going to fit into the first look lineup here. Tons of good plays in this range as well. Chris Godwin's been absolutely smashing in this full-time slot role. That's what we wanted coming into the season. That's exactly what's happened. 8 for 83 and a touchdown week 1, 7 for 117 and a touchdown in week 2. Should avoid Pat Surtain in the slot as well. We should see Surtain kind of shadow Mike Evans, and those guys will be clashing on the outside. Chris Godwin will be free to just absolutely feast again this weekend at 6,500. Malik Neighbors with an absurd 64% target share in week 1. He's seen around 40% of the team targets through 2 weeks, which is exactly what we expected coming to the season. Super tough matchup here against a good Brown secondary, but that volume will win out for me more times than not. Chris Olave has looked great. The box score has not shown it, but he's been on the field a ton. He's been running valuable routes in this offense, and I think it's going to click. I feel like Chris Olave has always ran cold when it comes to touchdowns, and that happened again last week. I don't know if you guys remember, but he got tackled at the 1-yard line, I'm pretty sure, or he caught the ball and it just didn't break the plane. I don't know if you guys remember what I'm talking about, but once again, super close to a touchdown last week, just didn't happen, but really bullish on Chris Olave's outlook for the remainder of the season, especially with how good the Saints offense has looked. I think the big games are certainly coming for Chris Olave, and I like him there at 6,300. Brandon Ayuk without Deebo Samuel, without Christian McCaffrey at 6,200 definitely needs to be mentioned. Jackson Smith and the Jigba, 5,400, coming off a 16-target game, 12 catches for 117 yards. I told you guys in week 1, I thought that there's a chance that JSN leads this team in catches this year and kind of usurps DK Metcalf as like the leading catch guy. That happened in week 2. He had 12 catches. I mean, we really can't complain about that. Super good role there for JSN. The in terms of routes he's running are much more valuable this year than that low ADOT stuff we saw last year as well. So I like him at 5,400. I love Jameson Williams at 5,800. He has more expected fantasy points per game on the season than Amon-Ra St. Brown. 11 targets in week 2. They continued to scheme up a ton of looks for him. The first pass of the game was a little slant route to him. He got held on it. They didn't call it. They were scheming up red zone looks for him as well, where he's the first read and the play is directed to go to him. So really love his role, love this game. And I love his price at 5,800. If he scored a touchdown last week, I think he'd be over 6K. So we're still getting a little bit of a value when it comes to JMO there at 5,800. Tank Dell, 5,200. I like Shaheed in this range too, but more so for tournaments. Tank Dell is going to erupt at some point. This game log is pathetic. He almost had a touchdown in week 1. He had a wide open bomb touchdown in week 2. He dropped it. I am not worried at all when it comes to Tank Dell. The eruption of Tank Dell is coming soon, and you want to be ahead of it. I think he's going to be really chalky this week at 5,200 because it's going to be the hot button topic all week of he's gotten unlucky and he's going to break out soon. So I think that Tank Dell is going to be pretty chalky at 5,200, even though his game log is 9 points and 2 points. Moving down, I guess the next, after we get through this JSN and Tank Dell range, I think the big question here is going to be what to do with the Rams, right? We have Demarcus Robinson, we have Tyler Johnson, and we have Jordan Whittington, right? And I guess to a lesser extent, Tutu Atwell. So these are going to be the 4 guys that we're really considering from the Rams when it comes to DFS this week. No Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua. Demarcus Robinson is kind of like the number 1, you would say, receiver left in this offense. Tyler Johnson was kind of a popular play last week as well. You have him in there, and then Jordan Whittington. So for me, I don't have any gauge in terms of where these guys are going to shake out in ownership. I do think, both Robinson and Tyler Johnson will be higher owned than Whittington when it all shakes out. But to be quite honest with you guys, as of right now, I think Whittington is the most interesting to me. So he only had 4.2 points against Arizona, but more importantly, he played every single snap once Cooper Kupp got injured. When Cooper Kupp left the game, which was at halftime, he didn't come back out for halftime. So we have an entire half sample size here. Whittington played every snap for the Rams in the second half. If you don't watch preseason football a lot like I do, Whittington is someone that McVay was really high on in the preseason. They used him a ton in their first couple preseason games, and he looked great. More importantly, though, he can mix in and get some rushing attempts as well. So I think Whittington is more similar to how they use Puka Nacua. And we kind of know what Demarcus Robinson is. We kind of know what Tyler Johnson is at this point. So we have a little bit of upside here. That he could get some schemed up rushing attempts, especially with Kyron Williams not being super great to start the season. So we have that upside. And then we also have the upside that maybe he just ends up being the best receiver of these 3 guys. Like he might just be the best actual football player. So that leads me to like Whittington a little bit at 4,200. I'm going to go ahead and put him in this first look lineup, but that's not sticky. I want to see where the ownership shakes out here, especially for cash. Like for cash, I'll probably just play the highest owned Rams guy, but I'm going to tell you right now, this weekend, at least for tournaments or my teams, I'm going to be more interested in Jordan Whittington, I think. Last person I'll mention here at receiver, all the way down min priced, we have Jacob Cowing. So I was talking about this guy in the preseason. I was talking about him last year at Arizona. If you guys don't watch college football, Arizona had the most electric team outside of probably Washington last year to watch. They had Noah Fafita at quarterback, Tedero McMillan, who's going to be a top 15 pick in this year's NFL draft at receiver. And they also have Jacob Cowing. So just super fun, high-flying offense last year. Jacob Cowing absolutely balled out for San Francisco in the preseason. And I dubbed Jacob Cowing this year's version of Tank Dell. If you guys remember last year, I was super high on Tank Dell. Jacob Cowing is the exact archetype of guy that I want to buy in the current landscape of NFL. He's a good route runner. He's an elite separator. This guy can get open when he's on the field, and that's most important to me. I think that he probably won't project for crazy ownership because we haven't really seen him. He's only been, returning kicks thus far. He has not gone on the field, but I'm going to be very interested in Jacob Cowing this week for tournaments. If he gets any sort of a chance to run routes, I think he's going it's going to be hard to keep him off the field because I think he'll take advantage of his opportunity. Elite separator. It's a good matchup here against the Rams too. So Jacob Cowing, min priced, just something to note for this week. Don't think I will be getting there in cash games, but I am interested in some Jacob Cowing this week. I'm going to leave that third receiver spot blank on the first look lineup for right now, and we'll come back. Tight end, Trey McBride at the top, Sam Laporte at the top, George Kittle. We've kind of seen tight ends struggle to start the season. Trey McBride's been the best one, and he benefited from he recovered a fumble, in the end zone last week for a touchdown. He'll be popular just because Kyler's going to be popular. Curious to see where George Kittle's ownership shakes out with Debo out now as well. He had a big game last week. He's 5,700. Brock Bowers, dude, Brock Bowers, best tight end prospect basically of all time. And even on a bad team, he's clearly cemented himself as a future all-pro at this position. Could not be more excited for what we've seen from Brock Bowers. So he's definitely, on my radar here at 5,400. Don't know if I can get there in cash, but yeah, certainly I'm interested there. Dropping down a little bit farther, Colby Parkinson was chalk last week. He did absolutely nothing. But now we have Cooper Kupp out again, so he'll project well again. Luke Schoonmaker, played him in some tournament lineups last weekend. 10 points for 3,300. I'll take that all day if Jake Ferguson is out again. So I might plug him into the first look lineup. And obviously, that's contingent on whether or not Ferguson is going to play. So with this current lineup that we have, if you're not watching on YouTube and you're listening to this, we have Kyler Murray, Jordan Mason, Zach Charbonnet, Devontae Smith, Jordan Whittington, Luke Schoonmaker. Let's plug in us a cheap defense here. Tennessee looks interesting to me against Malik Willis. Revenge game for Malik Willis, but Tennessee's actually allowed the fewest yards in the NFL through 2 weeks, yet somehow they're 0-2 in the win-loss column. Don't know how that's possible. I guess I do know how it's possible. It's just bad quarterback play from Will Levis and untimely turnovers and choking a 17-0 lead in week 1. But yeah. All right. So we plug in the cheap D there. That gives us 69 per position. We can go ahead and just slam in Chris Godwin here, who I definitely would love. And then 7,300 for a flex. I mean, there's several options there that you could look at. Achane maybe, or you could even probably drop. I mean, you could drop even lower on the defense and maybe get up to a Kamara if you want to do that. But yeah, 7,300 left in the flex. Plenty of options there to figure out. With that being said, if you made it to the end of the video, please drop a like, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you guys. Please follow me on Twitter at Ben Hostler and tune in to the Sunday morning stream, 11 a.m. We've had great viewership on that for the first few weeks, so I'll be on there Sunday morning answering all your questions. Follow my Twitch, Ben Hostler Bets. I will be on there. I do a live stream every Monday reviewing the games, and I'll have some more streams there throughout the weeks as well. Thank you guys for tuning in. Good luck in your week 3 contests, and I'll see everybody on Sunday morning.